it's a big taxing area as well. So I understand people think, when I look at my tax bill, that's the biggest chunk that's out of that. So everybody pays attention to that. I get that. Yes. Very cool. Yes. Yeah. 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 Sure, absolutely, yeah. It's always that balance of when you got a lot of people moving in and then you got to grow and build new things for them. There's cost to that, but then how do you do that that seems to make the most sense and you're not maybe overspending on anything? It's always a balance.
Here's an example right here.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't know that. That's Shannon told me that. I was like, okay. So are they out?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's funny you say that because it's the first time I've been in this building. I've been in the county for 40-some years now. I remember used to coming up here and seeing things, and it's just, I'm wondering for folks who've been in the community for a long time, what do they think about the facilities and the growth and all of that? Yeah, just up the road. Yes, exactly. I remember being in that. Yes, absolutely. Well, and we are fortunate in Johnson County to have a tremendous library system throughout the county. Over the years that they
Pay a
have built.
library tax, and it helps to support it.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're actually getting a new library and build an expansion on Spring Hill one down there as well. So yep, I understand that totally. But well, thanks for being here this morning.
Hope to see you
Good luck.
Thursday.
Don't fight with Ree this morning. How you doing, sir? You look awesome. Did you wear your K-State jacket just for me?
Just for you, buddy.
How's your week been? Okay.
Okay, it's busy. I'm emceeing Chinese New Year tonight. So
Yes.
I come directly from dress rehearsal to this, and then go back.
Good morning. I'm just giving a 1-minute warning before we get started. Feel free to grab your coffee, get settled.
Awesome. Very good.
Reese, how are you?
Okay. Tough week. Silas is making a splash right off the bat, isn't he?
Way to go, Silas. Yes, he is. Yeah.
Love it.
Okay, it's 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Feel free to still grab your coffee and donuts, though. Good morning. I'm Ashley Fick. I am a program coordinator here with the library, and I'm very excited to have you here. And I want to start by thanking our legislators for being here on their Saturday morning. I know it's a very busy time of year. and it's cold outside, and so maybe it would have been more appealing to be in bed for all of us, but we're here, and so I also want to thank the audience for that too. Before we get started, I have just a couple pieces of housekeeping for us to get going. Please submit all questions on note cards. That's how you'll get your question asked. It makes us able to ask the most questions possible when we do it that way. Also, if you can, write as legibly as possible. It makes it a lot easier for me to actually ask your question if I can read it. And Jeopardy rules, make sure it is in the form of a question. I can't ask a question if it's not a question. Also, in this room, we're a little bit more tightly packed than some of the other rooms. If you could pass them to the ends when possible, that will make just collecting them easier for us. If you can't, that's okay. We'll make it work. And also, we ask that you refrain from calling out, cheering, clapping, and booing. No booing. I'm sure that's not going to be a problem. But that will, yeah, no clapping, no booing. It will help us just maintain a respectful aura and also keep things moving along so we can ask as many of your questions as possible. And then I just want to note that we also ask every legislator with constituents in Johnson County to participate in these, so that's how they're here. If you don't see your legislator on the list, just shoot them an email, let them know. I'll add them at any point in this. And we've got a timekeeper. They're here to keep us honest, particularly me. And so we're going to get going with 3 minutes from each legislator with an introduction. That's their time to share what they want to share, and then we'll move on to your questions. And then finally, I just want to share that an opinion poll in March of 2025, found that 72% of Americans desire to be part of the solution in restoring civility to our country. I would like this event here to be part of that solution and set the tone starting from there. So we're going to move just down the line, if that's okay, and start with Representative Ousley and just go left to right. No, right. Never mind. I don't know my left and right, apparently. We'll just get started.
We'll try. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Library, for hosting us. We've been doing this a lot of years. It's nice to be here in the Merriam branch. Good to be home. I guess my name's Jarrod Ousley. I've been representing House District 24 for going on 12 years now, 12 sessions. And over those sessions, my committee assignments have changed. I've learned a lot, learned a little about some things and more about others. Every session is unique. This one's no exception. If you all are here, you've been following what we're doing, and I question the priorities of the House at this time. We'll see if we can swing it around, but I do serve on appropriations as my 9 a.m. committee, and we're assembling the budget at a rocket pace, and my 130s are still welfare and child welfare, and we're up to some good there, up to no good in other spots, and I've recently been appointed to the K-12 budget ranking position in the House, where we're also assembling the K-12 budget, where Monday we will actually dive into budget recommendations, and we'll start assembling, half of the state's budget in that committee, including the special education funding. So we're trying to keep an eye upon what we did during the interim over a special budget committee, and I'm way in the weeds. Never mind. Whatever you all want to talk about, that's what I'm here to talk about this morning. Again, my name is Jarrod Ousley. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Senator Pettey. I represent the Senate 6th District, and for many of you who I've seen in the past, you realize I represent a lot of Wyandotte County and a small portion of Johnson County, mostly in Merriam. And so I'm always excited to be part of the legislative forums that the League of Women Voters and the libraries provide during the session. I'm starting my 14th year in the Senate, and one thing I will say is, as Representative Ousley mentioned, we are, and you probably, anything you read, like the Reflector or the Sunflower Journal, or Loud Lights, I'm giving a plug for all those, they're all good sources to look at. They will tell you that, and I was hearing this before we went back to session, it's going to be a really, really fast session. Well, it is, especially with the the budget, because we generally have been dealing with passing out on the Senate side or on the House side, passing out a budget after what we call turnaround, which will be the 20th of February. But no, this year it's going to be different. We're going to pass out the budget before turnaround. That's the plan. And what? Yeah, February 11th. So that it will be passed out from both the House and the Senate, which, just as Representative Ousley referred to, means that if you're on Ways and Means in the Senate or Appropriations in the House, you're spending a lot of time in budget committees. We have, last year, the Senate chose not to have any subcommittees, to my discuss. I complained about it all the time because I'm ranking minority on Ways and Means, but it didn't change. But this year we do have subcommittees, so that means I even am more committed and unavailable to meet with constituents at all during this part of the session. It also ties up the other committees as well, because on the Senate side, we're, a lot of the budgets are being heard, whether you're in public health and welfare, or whether you're in education, or whether you're in local government, which I'm in all of those. We're also hearing budgets there. So the other thing is that this session is being driven a lot by what I will call government efficiency, which is just another term, I think, to look for fraud and how to place look for ways to take funds away from those the most needy. So I'm sure we'll delve into that even more. So thank you. Again, I'm Senator Pat Pettey, and I have my cards here if you need to talk to me later.
Hi, I'm Representative Rui Xu, House District 25, which is Northeast Johnson County, Mission, Roland Park, Fairway, up in that neck of the woods. And this was a really tough week in Topeka, and I think all of us would agree on that. Sometimes my friends ask me, "Hey, what's your job like?" It's like it's mostly like other jobs, except our bad days are really bad. Our bad days kind of end up with trans kids and not being able to use the bathrooms that they want to use anymore. And I know that generally the public doesn't care about process arguments, but truly the process of getting this bathroom ban through was truly heinous. So we knew going into the session that the Attorney General, Chris Kobach, wanted to kind of fix an issue that the courts had deemed with allowing trans Kansans to change the gender markers on their driver's licenses. And so we knew we were going to have to deal with that. And so that was introduced the first day of session, had a hearing the second day of session, and then just kind of sat for a couple days. And then on this Monday, they decided to work the bill in House Judiciary, which was a little unannounced, but they're allowed to do that. But at the very end of that hearing, they all of a sudden added in this whole new amendment, that the bathroom ban, which none of us had heard about or expected or had any idea was coming. And so them doing it this way and then placing it into a Senate bill means that the public has never been able to have input on that particular portion of the bill on either chamber, and now it's on its way to the governor's desk already. And then so that truly is terrible for such a big change for so many of our friends and family here in Kansas. So we don't have filibuster. We don't allow for the filibuster in the Kansas House rules. I don't think the Senate either. And so very rarely are we able to do much in terms of slowing things down. But I was really proud of the House Democrats on Wednesday when we debated this bill on the House floor, because we held the floor for 6 hours, which meant the whole time we had to be talking, we had to be introducing amendments, we had to be asking questions of each other as kind of a team game. Because, one, they had a rally that we knew they wanted to be at 1:30, and so we wanted to at least make it painful enough for them that they couldn't attend that. And just know that if they weren't going to have public input on this particular bill, then they could at least hear from us, and we could speak for our constituents and have that said in a public forum. So I was really proud that we were at least able to do that. But all in all, it was just very, very tough week for us. The other thing that the bill does, which is very confusing to me, is it also outlaws multi-use gender-neutral bathrooms, multi-occupancy gender-neutral bathrooms in all public buildings in the state. And so these are like the bathrooms at MCI, right? Like the shared sinks, but everybody has their own bathrooms. And it just prevents that from being able to happen in any of the public buildings. I think some of our schools already have that. The new Chiefs Stadium, which will be government owned, now cannot do that as well. So we're making design decisions for the NFL as well. So all of that was very odd, but excited to hear your questions, excited to be here. Thank you.
If I can. just tag on to Reese, thank you to staff for that day also, because staff worked their tails off and kept up with us, so.
My
And the
question,
Senate just got to concur or non-concur, which I did, non-concur.
how will star bonds affect the taxpayers in Merriam for the Chiefs Stadium in KCK? This question says, how will the star bonds affect the taxpayers in Merriam for the Chiefs Stadium in KCK?
First of all, I don't think that Merriam, you guys would know better, I don't think Merriam is in the proposed district number 1. And I think the district will end up falling or shrinking. It's been no secret that I'm not a huge fan of this particular deal, but I don't think that the star bonds will actively affect anything at the city or local level unless the city opts into it, even if they are in the star bonds district. And so for Wyandotte, for example, they would have to willingly, by city council action or UG action, pledge kind of the local increased revenue to pay off the star bonds, but they don't have to. For the state level for the revenue, what it means is basically like at 2031, they set the baseline of the tax receipts. Let's say it's $10 billion for the size of the star bonds district, or let's say it's $1 billion for the size of the star bonds district. So that means in 2032, anything that the state receives past that $1 billion would go off to pay the star bonds. So if it goes to $1.5 billion the next year in that district, then the $0.5 billion will go to pay off the star bonds. So the state will receive a little bit less than they otherwise would have, but the city doesn't have to unless they opt into it.
And I do live in Wyandotte County. So the local units of government have 60 days, which has not been in past star bond legislation, but they have 60 days to take a vote on whether they're going to commit a portion of the new tax, the new sales tax that would be generated in that star bond districts. Yeah, I'm not. To my knowledge, we'd have to see once the Chiefs, which they have not done yet, but once the Chiefs purchase property in Wyandotte County, and it will be somewhere close to the Legends, close to the Speedway. Once they purchase property, then that will help to determine what the star bond district will look like. The new star bond district for the Chiefs Stadium cannot include any current star bond area. So there are star bonds areas in Wyandotte County, and so it cannot include any of that as well. So they will be taking a vote in 60 days, and so there is a lot of questions. There is a lot, what benefits come to the local community, and I think there's also a lot of there's an attempt from the Department of Commerce and also from the chiefs to make sure that more information goes out. So people often feel like it's done behind closed doors, and actually, whether you're talking about local government or state government, those things are, because otherwise your property values can go up and you can't be able to move ahead with any economic development. I think you could talk to Merriam, a local government, they would tell you the same thing. Those kinds of decisions have to be made first before you make any announcements, and then you can move forward with the particulars.
I don't have too much to add to that other than just confirmation from the nods in the crowd from my phone and friends that it won't impact Merriam as it sits right now. But there are a lot of unanswered questions.
And we did get another question about the Chiefs Stadium, which kind of covered, but I want to give you the opportunity to answer if you have more to add. What do you think of the proposed Chiefs Stadium?
So as it was presented to us, and we voted on this years ago, right? We voted to allow the lieutenant governor, who's done a pretty phenomenal job of economic development into the state of Kansas, to allow him the authority to negotiate on behalf of the legislature. And that's the only vote that we've taken upon this. And at the time, the information we had was the Chiefs are moving. The Royals are looking, and there are other cities that are ready to roll out the red carpet for them. And do we want the Chiefs to remain the Kansas City Chiefs, or do we want them to leave the region altogether? And given that, You know, I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm like, no, I've grown up with the Kansas City Chiefs. They should stay here. And if we can do that in a sensible manner, then, you know, I'm gonna support this measure. We had also had the governor's agreement. Now it had expired, but on the border war, because, you know, we're not that far from state line that we can't not take into consideration what's good for the region. And I don't want to bash Missouri or take advantage of Missouri, but at the same time, if something's going to happen, then I think we ought to do what we can to keep the regional team. And that was my take on it.
I'll agree with everything that was said by Representative Ousley. And that was the part that we paid the state. It's not like I, living in Wyandotte County, or being representing Wyandotte County, knew anything more than what happened at the announcement on the day that they announced the contract had been signed between the Chiefs and the Department of Commerce. But that being said, our local delegation, the Wyandotte County delegation, has been involved in educational meetings with the Department of Commerce because I will say I want to see this move ahead. I think it can. I mean, I got to thinking yesterday. I thought, because believe me, I'm getting a lot of, I don't want the Chiefs here. Lots and lots and lots. The Chiefs announced, that was announcement, and then we had our legislative delegation meeting before we went back into session, like, I don't know, 3 days later. So guess what was the chief topic? That was about the Chiefs Stadium. It was not necessarily in a positive way. So that being said, the Department of Commerce is working hard with the local unit of government to provide as much information as they can. And I think I kind of laid out what has to happen before we really know what the is. I will say probably the one biggest thing is that when you see, if you've seen the map, it looks like it's all of Wyandotte County, and it's not going to be all of Wyandotte County. So that's a big angst for a lot of people that live in Wyandotte County. Hey, and also the understanding about what portion of the taxes that we're talking about. So I just want to say this question I got to think about yesterday was, okay, if we end up, if the unified government ends up voting against committing any of the sales tax, I can't predict how that's going to happen. But if they do, and if this deal would fall through, I mean, I guess there's always the possibility it could. So then, you know, in a year would people be saying, hey, we could have had the Chiefs here, and now they're in, I don't know, Tennessee. You know, why didn't we keep them here? So just, you know, keep that in your minds, that as well.
I will dissent a little bit. Usually I'm on the same side as these two on almost anything. This one is one where that is not the case. Just kind of ideologically, I studied economics in college, and basically there's no single economic study that's ever been done that shows that these stadium deals are worth it in the end. But I'm not so naive as to not to understand that you have to play ball a little bit for these stadiums and to allow these. I will say, I don't think that it is a point of pride that we gave away the largest stadium deal in the history of stadium deals. I think you know, the biggest beneficiary of that is the Hunts, who already have plenty of money to do so. And so I think we could have gone in with like half the amount. I think it's going to be about $2.4 billion that the public puts in, plus debt service. And I think we probably could have gone in about half the amount, and I would have been like, I don't know, I don't love it, but okay. But the amount that we are going to put in is concerning to me. The biggest concern for me is just kind of, as the senator alluded to, the size of the proposed Star Bonds district. And Commerce has told us that they think it will shrink, but assuming it does stay as big as it is, if you think about it, if you see 3% annual inflation over 30 years, which is kind of the life of the Star Bonds deal or a stadium in general, that means starting today, in 30 years, prices will be 150% what they are right now, so over double. So prices will be double, so the state will be paying 150% for prices for goods, but we won't be able to collect that much because any additional that we collect above the baseline will go towards paying off the Star Bonds. So I think we will have to change priorities as a state as this deal kind of goes on. I don't think it's going to be like we're defunding the schools. I don't want to be alarmist over that, but I do think that the long-term budget outlook will have to change as a result of kind of the realities of this deal.
If you'll allow me. Not to disagree with anything that the representative said, and just to
This never happens.
and just to piggyback on what the senator said, when we went to that announcement, I honestly thought we were going to walk into a situation where we were announcing we were getting the training camp, and the stadium was still going to stay in Missouri. That had just been my gut feeling the entire time. So then come to find out NFL rules say your training camp has to be in your same state. So this was a package deal. I had something else to say and I forgot. Oh, I don't like the game. Giving billionaires tax incentives is not my thing. But if these are the rules, I don't make the rules. We just play by them sometimes. And this is the most recent NFL deal. I think the Raiders was over 10 years ago. So while this might be the most lucrative, it's also the most recent. So that's it.
I'll just add a couple little things. One, in Jackson County, taxpayers paid 100% for the Arrowhead Stadium, 100% of the cost of the area. Our taxpayers, through the dedication of sales tax, will be paying 60%. $7 million a year is going to go. That's the highest amount that's being paid by any NFL team to go to maintain the stadium. So, where we think about, or we've heard about, with Arrowhead needing money to refurbish the stadium, that's more money than any other stadium will have going into it. So the team has to invest $1 billion to the $2.1 billion that's state sales tax dollars. So there are a lot of numbers out there being thrown around, so I think those are things to keep in mind as well.
So I just want to know, I see people standing in the back. We do in the very front row. If you want to sit in the very front row, we have some seats. And that black coat, I think, is my black coat. So if somebody wants to grab it so somebody can sit there, then that would be excellent. So sorry about that. How likely is it that veto on the trans bathroom bill can be sustained?
Not likely.
No.
Yeah, we've had the numbers in the past. So the numbers are we'd need 5 Republicans to vote with us on this. We have had 1 Republican always vote with us on this issue, Mark Schreiber. We've had 1 or 2 who have inconsistently voted with us on this issue, but only if the numbers were already there. So if they know that the numbers aren't going to be there, then they're not going to expend their political capital to be on our side just for the vote to fail anyways. And so we just can't find those remaining 2 to help sustain. So I think it's very unlikely. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Doesn't mean we shouldn't reach out to our Republican colleagues, and we will. But it's tough on this one. Usually we propose a lot of amendments on Wednesday, and usually we can kind of gauge by how the amendment votes are going, how many people are on our side on this issue, and it just didn't seem like there were very many wanting to play game on this one.
Thank you. What is the outlook for fully funding special education, and what does a potential plan get to 92% of excess costs for the districts look like?
Dismal. And we had a meeting, the Johnson County delegation had a meeting with our superintendents, and the superintendents, I should have brought my one-pager, they pointed out what the excess reimbursement costs that they are taking out of the general fund, and that amount was, with the 5 districts, over $60 million. So the governor's proposal and the governor's budget recommendations, which the legislature's barely paying attention to, if at all, maybe when it's convenient, it has a $50 million, special ed reimbursement increase to it. I think the State Department's plan is 145, but nobody's even paying attention to that, because in the past, the State Board of Education, the Department of Education have put out, a 4-year plan or a 5-year plan to get us to a 92%, and the legislature has failed to take that into account, and thrown kibbles and bits at what is a real mounting problem. So I think folks now are just, what can we get this year? They're not even looking at a 5-year plan, just what can we get this year? And the frustrating part about that to me is that due to lack of inflation and decreased enrollment, our overall budget for state-based aid per pupil, majority of the KSDE budget, is actually going to be less than was accounted for in last year's budget. You know, because it's always a forecast, right? We go off of last year's enrollment, and that's what we provide for next year. So because enrollment was down and weighted FTEs are down, the money was there, but the legislature has already swept it in reappropriations. If we had just left it alone and reappropriated it for SPED, we'd be on our way to 92%, but instead we're going to fight to keep our head above water. I think $24 million is the cost to keep us at the current percentage we're residing.
And I'll agree with everything that Representative Ousley has said. And the governor did speak to this in her, I believe, in her State of the State, and about, and this has come out repeatedly, how the federal government is not paying their portion of what should be going to special ed. And so that always comes into this argument, well, they're not paying their portion, so why should we be paying our portion? So there is work that's, or encouragement that's going on that the federal government should be paying their 40%, that they are not. And now it's like, I think like 14%. I would agree. I don't believe that it's going to be hard to see any more new dollars for special ed, even though the districts are spending more than they have and then having to use it from their other areas. That goes along with a lot of other things with K-12 education. I sit on the K-12 new K-12 budget committee that's been meeting to write a new K-12 formula. And so I think it's important to keep in mind how we haven't been meeting now during the session, but that committee is looking at at-risk funding and high-density at-risk funding. And those are big dollars that have a big impact on schools with the school districts with a lot of low-income students, which I represent. So that's going to be another issue that we will be facing during this session, as well as we move into, because we're supposed to have that new formula by next legislative session. There we do have legislation out there to extend it, not until 28, but I think that's to keep in mind too, how that's going to impact all of our funding.
I just want to take like a giant step back and just to kind of provide context here. So in state statute, it's required that the state funds 92% of excess costs for special education. As you guys could imagine, special education is very, very expensive to deliver versus kind of just your average student. And so the state is supposed to be funding that with the federal government kicking some of that money in, and they're not. So that's been a fight for a couple years of like getting more and more money for that. There is a dynamic too of, because of just kind of the services provided at rural versus urban or suburban schools, so many more parents of special ed kids are moving to Johnson County to take advantage of our wonderful schools, but that does mean that they are seeing kind of budget tightening as a result of that, right? They are, very expensive to deliver that care, and so they have to pay for it out of their own budgets rather than kind of the state money that should be funding that.
Is there anything that can be done to improve school funding? I teach in KCK, and I have a class size whose size just went up to 33 middle schoolers. I doubt that's only a problem in Wyandotte County. Johnson County kids also, and Wyandotte County kids deserve a class size where they can receive quality instruction.
Well, like I say, we could have left the appropriations reappropriated within KSDE and just reallocated them for special education, which then would have increased the state-based aid per pupil, and that would have freed up money that is currently going from a district's budget to cover the shortfall for special education reimbursement. If y'all can follow me through these weeds, I'm impressed. And it would have freed up money to allow for more teachers that would reduce class sizes. So it's a complex situation, but honestly, if the state would just do their job and put that money into special education, it would free up resources that could go directly to the classroom to reduce those class sizes. There, I got it in layman's terms.
Well, the Bay State aid wouldn't change. The Bay State aid would stay the same.
But they're robbing from that as the general fund to backfill SPED because the state's not doing their
Right, so they're getting the same pot of money depending on their enrollment, but that pot of money now has to be, more of it has to be spent on special ed than instead of other services that impact all students. So that's where the rub comes in. For school districts to have to make those decisions then, okay, we've got this same pot here, but our special ed number of students, they're not going down either in any school district. They're going up actually, and as Representative said, they're high cost, and in some districts, they're depending on the need and their IEP, very high cost. One-on-one, they need transportation, they need special services throughout the day. Some have to be intubated, So, but they have the right to be in our schools and to provide the most, the best learning opportunity possible. So, yeah, it is complicated, and when we continue to take more for that and not fund it, it impacts other students, and school boards like the Kansas School Board has to make those decisions. And I agree, no classroom should have 32 students.
Yeah, I agree with everything they said, and I also have something I've been toying around with my head, which is a little controversial. And I know this Shawnee Mission School Board's looked at it, but I think we got to try to figure out something on kind of equalizing PTAs a little bit. I was talking to like the treasurer of one of the PTAs in my district, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, we have $100,000 just kind of sitting there, don't really know what to do with it." And I'm like, there is so much you could do with that. At the very least, like pay off all the school lunch debt in your district, and and then so there's certain things that we can do. I don't fault parents for wanting to give to their kids' schools. I want that to happen. I just think that maybe also to do that, if you are in one of the 10 wealthiest district or schools areas in the state or in the county, then you also have to pick kind of one of the 10 poorest in your county as a pair, so you can kind of match the money or something like that. But just something like that, I think needs to happen. Just to provide extra resources for those schools that really need it, from the districts that have a lot.
I'm gonna take my second bite. Don't disagree with anything Representative Xu said. Different conversation, but one that is definitely worthy of being had. The reason I mentioned the state base aid per pupil is because that's where we kind of get our state general fund, for our USDs. And in that meeting with our Johnson County supers, our base state aid per pupil, I think right now is close to 6. It's 55, 56, 58, somewhere in there. The Gannon decision required us to keep up with inflation and to keep that number, throughout, so we don't wind up in courts again. But they put together that if they were to deduct everything that they're backfilling for special education, it reduces that base state aid per pupil, almost $1,400 per pupil. So it's significant, what our districts are having to provide to backfill the state and the Fed's shortcomings is very significant, and it impacts all students.
When DCF removes a child based on a single disputed medical opinion, what accountability exists for that decision? What reforms will you support to require independent review and due process before a family is separated and Kansas children are harmed? When DCF removes a child based on a single disputed medical opinion, what accountability exists for that decision? What reforms will you support to require independent review and due process before a family is separated?
So this question is regarding the CARES Act, child abuse pediatrician referral examination. This is something that the legislature passed almost unanimously, if not unanimously, 3 or 4 years ago. We had multiple hearings on it, and the idea was pretty simple, that if a child comes in to any mandatory reporter's purview, maybe not mandatory reporters, maybe physicians, then they could request a child abuse pediatrician exam. And this child abuse pediatrician is trained to examine marks of child abuse that might otherwise be looked at as, an accident on the playground or otherwise. So it's come to light that sometimes, in some situations, child abuse pediatricians have mismarked what was not deemed child abuse by another examination, yet the processes put forth in the CARES Act had already taken place, and in cases the family was separated, the child was separated from the family. So this has been brought to our attention, and I know that in child welfare there is a bill floating around, and I know that we're going to discuss it. I've not looked at the ins and outs of it, so I can't say what measures I would support or not support today, but obviously we don't want to be tearing families apart that don't need to be torn apart. We don't want to misdiagnose child abuse. We don't want to overlook child abuse, so somewhere we've got to find an accurate solution.
Yeah, and Jarrod, this is the situation happened with a constituent of mine, and on her behalf, I'm introducing a bill into child welfare on Monday, so we'll take a look at it.
We've got some questions about ICE. I'm going to try and group them. So ICE in Kansas, what can we do to protest legally? And what can the legislature be able to do to protect our communities from ICE? This person said, I just read in the New York Times that there's a memo allowing federal ICE agents to make arrests without any kinds of warrants.
On that kind of front, there is a group of House Democrats who have co-sponsored a bill to do kind of just those things. ICE have to have no masks on, have identifying features or identifying tag, no warrantless searches like that. We just had a press conference on that on Thursday. Probably not going to go anywhere in the Kansas legislature, but we just at least wanted people to know that we see them, that we hear them, and that there are people out there interested in doing it. That said, most of this is happening at the federal level, and so we just have to keep each other safe. I support all of us for exercising our First Amendment rights and protesting as peacefully, but as vociferously as we can against just truly heinous things that are happening in this country. There was actually just a bill, and I was only one of 4 people to vote against it, which feels very weird, but it was because of the moment. And it was like a big package of criminal justice bills, but in it was just like one line that just said that it would now become like a felony, I think, to point a laser pointer at a law enforcement officer in the duty of their job, which shouldn't happen. I don't support people doing that. But I do think kind of in the current moment, it seemed a little bit overly punitive I think it would be probably used just to punish protesters for that, and so that was kind of one of the reasons I voted no on that.
I respect that no vote. I mentioned that I questioned our priorities in the House. We opened the House with a resolution condemning World Health Organization operations within the state of Kansas, and last I checked, they didn't have any authority in Kansas. On the same note, we're a state government. We don't have any authority over the federal government. So, practice your rights out there. Be safe, be smart, look out for your neighbors.
Actually, on that one, so the bill was like the language said, the World Health Organization or the UN shall have no jurisdiction within the state of Kansas. So what we did as the House Democrats, we actually introduced an amendment that erased World Health Organization and just wrote ICE and said, ICE shall have no jurisdiction within the state of Kansas. And so we got to have like a 2-hour-long conversation about that and what was happening before they finally called germaneness on that amendment and shoved us away. But we at least got 2 hours of public conversation about that.
So, I think it's just this question is about ICE, but as far as the legislature is concerned, we were focusing on some of these very narrow social issues like the bathroom ban, or in my case, on the Senate side, a resolution was just passed to have a Charlie Kirk Day, October the 14th of every year, although a resolution can only be for 1 year, but as a colleague of mine reminded them, actually that's the birthday of Dwight D. Eisenhower, so it's already celebrated in Abilene as Dwight D. Eisenhower Day. But it's just an example of that's where their focus wants to be, and when it comes to ICE, I very much support the House bill that was introduced. Maybe this has happened to you. I had some close friends living in Lenexa, and they were just going down the street, and there was ICE trying to, arrest somebody, and they just wanted to pass. And he felt that maybe they were going to get shot just trying to go past. So I do think that, we are seeing situations that are beyond our control and are not for the good and safety of those we represent. So not having masks and being identified, it's important for our police officers. It should be important for ICE as well.
What are you doing to keep our tax dollars from funding AI-powered mass surveillance like flock security?
Your appropriations?
What are you doing to keep our tax dollars from funding AI-powered mass surveillance like flock security?
So I'm unaware with this subject. I've heard of AI surveillance in schools that had been voted for and appropriated. I'm unfamiliar with this question, the subject of this question.
Let's not call out, though. We can talk later after.
I'll have to pass on this as well.
Yeah, I would say this exact subject has not been broached in the Kansas legislature. I would say the Kansas legislature is not the most tech-savvy bunch in the world. And so while I am broadly familiar with AI, even I am not familiar with specifically its uses in mass surveillance and certainly its uses in state government. So if you do know more than we do, please let us know. We can talk about it. We can kind of bubble it up. I do think there is a bipartisan group that is interested in tackling AI and its ramifications for our children, for our daily lives. Luckily, this is an issue kind of similar to kind of the Chiefs issue and data centers broadly that has not become partisan yet. There are kind of people on both sides of the aisle with concerns on both. So please let us know. Obviously, we're not familiar with it right now.
And I don't know if it's related, but I do recall a bill a while ago that would have allowed law enforcement to put surveillance equipment on utility poles. And I can say I didn't support that measure, but I don't even know if that's related to the question.
We have one that regards voting or elections. I'm concerned that the federal administration will interfere in 2026 elections. We still don't know why Fred Sherman was fired. And then this is their take. How will you resist federal efforts to make elections less secure?
I'll watch my votes in the House closely, and I will cast my ballot in November carefully.
Well, I do think, and I don't serve on elections in the Senate, but on the House side, I do know that there's a number of bills that have been put forth in elections mostly from the chair of elections who's running for Secretary of State, to limit in lots of ways. And also within those committees, limiting as we've said, with this speeded up session, limiting your opportunities to speak against bills or for bills, and then ramrodding them through the committee. I think it's a big issue, and I do believe that we have to be very attuned both at the state level and the federal level, because I agree, I'm worried how actions that are going on in other states right now are going to impact how we have access as voters to our polls without voters feeling that they're being intimidated to go in the door. Right now, we'll just have to continue to watch what's coming through our legislature.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, with everything going on with the ICE, you even hear stories of Latino families who are legally here scared to go out. I went to Disneyland over the summer, and you could tell attendance was just down, even from Latino families who are legally here, just because they were afraid to go out. And so certainly we don't want that to be the case when it comes to voting, which would be their right. I think, like Jarrod alluded to, we will firmly resist, all three of us, any bill that restricts voter access. And then I think as voters, we also have responsibilities to keep track. On the Secretary of State's website, you can track any mail-in ballot that you send in. So make sure that it gets sent out to you. Make sure that when you send it back in, that it gets in and counted, and it will tell you when they do process it. So make sure you do that. And then I will say, you know, while I am deeply distrustful of this federal administration right now, the polling process is highly decentralized. There is a reason that it has been set up this way, to where there are so many polling places and so many people that have to touch ballots to make sure that it gets counted, and that there is a process for it to exchange hands. And so it would be very, very, very difficult for it to vastly be manipulated, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be aware, and if you see anything, you should let some of us know.
What is your position on the amendment to be on the August 26th ballot related to making the Supreme Court justices elected versus appointed?
That's an easy one.
That would be no. I mean, against the amendment. So, you know, this kind of goes along with the, you know, access to voting. I mean, we have a process in place that comes through the governor's office. You know, there's a committee that's put in place. It's made up of the lawyers as well as individual citizens. I mean, in fact, I know that the former mayor, CEO of Wyandotte County, Carol Marinovich, she was asked to serve on that and has served on that for a while. And then they make recommendation of 3 to go to the governor, and she looks at chooses from that. This came about because of fraud. So that's why it's in the, you know, it's in the Constitution the way it is. We just have to look at other states and see how judge positions have been, you know, attempted to be bought by those who don't live in that state. And I certainly don't want to see that happening in Kansas. You may disagree or agree with a ruling by the Kansas Supreme Court, but that can be true at any court level. So I'm very much against changing our Constitution. I think it just sets us up for the whole situation of us no longer being in control as voters, and as citizens to have the best legal representation at the highest level in Kansas with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and just to level set again real quick, in August 2026, this August, there will be a vote that changes our current Supreme Court nominating system, which is kind of like a bipartisan, nonpartisan group of lawyers and non-lawyers to give the 3 names, and then the governor chooses one, and change it to become a partisan elected position. And so if you look at the other states that have done it, like Wisconsin just had one this past November or 2 Novembers ago, like $100 million was spent on one race in there, mostly from outside sources. And so these races get like super toxic and then like just super weird in a way that our current Supreme Court process isn't. And the reason that they want to change it is because the Republicans, the majority party, don't like how they have ruled on abortion, don't like how our Supreme Court has ruled on public school funding, and so they're trying to change the makeup of the Supreme Court. So I think all three of us are firmly no's on that one.
I wholeheartedly agree with the representative. The reason they're doing this is because they disagree with the rulings that have come out of the court. I take this back to painting contracting. You know, in a previous lifetime, I was a house painter, and for 20 years, I ran a small business off word of mouth, and it would make me cringe when somebody would open up the yellow pages, and now I'm showing my age. But they would open the yellow pages to look for a contractor. I'm like, look, you got reasonable contractors right here in your house that you trust, that no other contractors. If you need something done, come and talk to the people that know the people. And I've always kind of taken that perspective to our merit-based system, that these are the attorneys that are in front of judges, that know the judges know the attorneys, and this is a merit-based process. This is word of mouth. You know, this is by the people in the courtroom. It's not by the folks that are investing in the campaigns. It's not by the special interest group that want a new ruling upon this. It's about upholding law. And if we want to uphold the law, we need to keep our current system.
How will Kansas wetlands be protected now that the EPA's definition of a wetland has changed, reducing the wetlands that will receive federal protection?
Sorry, I did my service on the Agriculture Committee for 6 years, and then just this biennium I got moved to tax. So I could have had a better answer before, but I mean, I think it just rolls down to if the EPA is not going to protect it, then it's down to the state of Kansas to do so. And then I don't know if these two have explicitly said it. These are both kind of appropriation, ways and means people. But the legislature is taking a concerted effort to cut $200 million out of the budget this year. Not for any particular reason. Like there's no like real reason we have to do it. They just feel like doing it. And so state money is very hard to come by for that reason. So I don't know specifically the details of this, but oftentimes we have relied on the EPA and the federal government to protect our environment, and it does not seem like this one wants to.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, I think this is, I can't speak specifically. I don't serve, I do serve on Ways and Means, and that budget hasn't come before us yet. But this just goes along with, you know, we're being hit at multiple levels. I'll just take like, for example, social services with SNAP funding, that shifting the burden for providing those services back to the state, and then the legislature, and I'll just use one part of SNAP funding, that for administration, it has been a 50-50, 50% paid from the state at SGF and 50% paid by the federal government. And with the one big beautiful bill, those words are hard to come out of my mouth, but it changed it to 75-25. And so that's a cost. And that's, but those, and for us to administrate, to do the administration of that. And that's just one part of the cost for SNAP. But so that just goes along with this shifting those costs and those responsibilities back to state level, but yet still holding it at a certain expectation. So I think it's real important that we all continue to look at how is the state of Kansas being impacted. I mean, you know, last weekend as an example, I'm getting off track here, but FEMA, you know, all across the country, what do we have? You know, or half our country was being impacted by ice and snow, and so you know, multiple states were saying we're putting, like ours, it was a disaster time, and FEMA, which has now lost 4,000 employees, they were keeping people that had already gotten their pink slips because, hey, we're going to provide, maybe we have to provide services, or maybe we're going to, or we're going to act like for this one emergency. So I think that's just another example of how we need to stay in tune and hold our federal government responsible for their partnership with the states on providing, whether it's wetlands or disaster relief.
We'll see the state's priorities.
Is there anything being done to limit construction or mitigate harm to communities done by data centers in Kansas?
Well, those data centers are moving along in different communities. Wichita does have a data center in operation already, and they have put in some, for example, community locations so that they don't impact that community directly. I have to beg off here and just say, I know there's a lot of that going on about the grid and the impact on how it will be for our, utilities, but I think that's a debate that's still going on. So I'll just defer.
Yeah, I think data centers are interesting. It's an issue that I've kind of moved back and forth on quite a bit over the last 2 years or so as they've become a bigger thing. My biggest thing is that I don't think that taxpayer money should be going towards building them, number one. I don't really mind them in and of themselves if they're in areas that don't have a lot else going on and that are going to pay for their own energy. If they do those things, fine. But I wasn't there, but I have a friend who went to a Google conference in Chicago over the summer, and even Google was saying, like, don't give us tax incentives for data centers. Like, we can pay for them. They're going to go up somewhere, and so, like, there's no reason to give taxpayer money for that. I will say, if local municipalities or local residents want to oppose them because of the location, because of concerns, that's fine. I support them in doing so. But in and of themselves, I don't know that there is that much concern. Originally, I was concerned about water usage with them, but in my research, it seems like they're going to become much more efficient going forward. Some of the data is that they're becoming 90% efficient on water. So before, they would actually have to bring in new water, right, all the time to kind of cool all of them. Now they're trying to figure out a way to reuse the water to keep things cool. So, I'm still movable on this one. Again, this is not like a really crazy partisan issue. There's nuance there, but that's where I'm at.
The representative hit the only point I wanted to make, in that I think that public pushback has caused the data center construction and design to be more efficient. They're moving to closed coolant systems and recycling that water instead of, just using whatever water's there and moving on to the next location. So.
And we got 2 minutes left, so maybe 1 minute on maybe 2 questions. We'll see how long you go. As we sit in a library, what are the emerging threats to book banning?
I've not heard of any recently.
I can't say directly, but indirectly, I'll just say we've worked on the library budget and for our public libraries, and I've been a proponent of an increase. Actually, I have to be fair here. We are actually spending less money at the state level than we did 20 years ago on public library funding. So most of your public library funding is coming from your local communities. But in the Senate, there's been a push to provide $1,000 per library, because there's 2 pots of money they get per library, and then also get per resident in that library area. And I have a fellow senator that in Ways and Means said that, there was no reason why we should be funding libraries because, they're a dinosaur. We don't need them. They're going away. Why would we fund them? So that's a constant that I think we have to be realistic about. We're sitting in a library, and about how much is offered by our libraries to anyone. I am fearful of some things that have happened that you might have to show a driver's license. That's kind of what the talk. That was about any public services this week in the Kansas Senate. So it makes so you have to show that if you're going to walk in the door. So I'm just saying you need to be vigilant about protecting your library and what it provides. And the thing is, I had to say, well, so it doesn't matter if we're talking about whether your children go to public school or private school or whatever, our libraries provide all that. In fact, I can't speak for Merriam, but most of them have like a day for home schools students that they provide services and support. So, libraries are there to help for all of us and for everyone, no matter what the age. So it's behooving all of us to want to protect them. And I think that's part of holding that conversation about you want these services.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I don't think I've heard anything from like a state level. I think there are concerns in like different rural districts about maybe them banning certain books, but I haven't heard of anything around here or at the state level.
So we are over time, and I, as usual, did not get to all of your questions, but I do want to note we have the contact information on all of your chairs for every single legislator that has constituents in Johnson County, not Kansas, in Johnson County. So if we didn't get to your question and you want information, I encourage you to follow up that way. Typically, I can't promise, but the legislators do hang around and they're happy to chat with you at the end. So if you do have something you want to chat with, I encourage you to do that as well. And then finally, I believe we have coffee and donuts. Yep, Brittany's giving me the thumbs up. We have coffee and donuts, so grab an extra cup of coffee or an extra donut on your way out. Thank you so much for coming on this cold, chilly day. And thank you to our legislators again. I walked away with the microphone. Can I just give it to you? Thank you.
Yeah, college. So that's cool.